Hello class and welcome to week 13 of our COMM1085 online series. This week we will be talking about the final draft that you should start writing as soon as you can. We're going to talk about how to understand the review process. We're going to discuss the revision checklist. We're going to talk a little bit about best practices for editing and revision as well. So this should give you all the tools necessary to write your final draft. So let's take a look at the criteria for the research project final report. It is under week 13 in assignments under content in Conestoga. It is worth 20% of your final mark. So your task: in this assignment, you'll demonstrate your ability to answer your original research question or a modified one with the help of me, your instructor, reinforcing your analysis with relevant and appropriate text references. So based on the topic that you had approved for your proposal assignment and using the comprehensive outline you've already created, write an essay that expresses your answer to the research question you set for yourself. So your thesis should be the answer to your research question. Once you have finished planning your paper, write a draft, revise it for organization and content, proofread it for mechanics and grammar, and then submit it to the appropriate submission folder for an originality check to ensure you have not overlooked any text references that need to be cited, quoted, or included in your reference page. So keep in mind that Turnitin may take up to an hour or more to produce this report. So the best thing to do is a few hours before the due date or the due time, submit it. Make sure the percentage isn't too high. If you find that there is a very high percentage on Turnitin, you can click on the Turnitin link and see what parts that you haven't cited. And then if you do need to redo it, edit your own copy and then re-upload it and delete the original one so that I only have one submission for you, okay? Make sure you double check your paper using the checklist provided at the end of the assignment. So on Conestoga, it's below the instructions. Once you are satisfied with your final version, submit it again to the submission folder. Like I said, try to remember to delete the first one and just leave the final copy in there for me, okay? The length should be 1,000 to 1,200 words. The format should include a title page, and it should be a complete essay following the 5-paragraph essay model, which we will discuss a little bit in this video, but I've also posted some links as an announcement on our homepage of our Conestoga. Just keep in mind that it should be 12-point Arial font, and you should double space your text. Your references should be made in APA at Conestoga documentation format, and that includes your in-text citations as well. It's important to remember to cite your sources using both in-text citations and a reference page consistent with the academic style guide that we've used through the term, which is APA at Conestoga. You should submit your assignment by April 15th by 11:59 p.m. If you need an extension, you can reach out to me. I know some of you already have, and we've been in contact. Late assignments will be accepted. If you have not talked to me about an extension, I will still accept late submissions, but if you have not talked to me ahead of time, you will get 10% off per day that it is late. So make sure to also check out the rubric for the research project final report. That is found in Conestoga as well. It's below the instructions. We also have a research project final draft checklist. That's also in the Conestoga assignments for week 13. And then below at the very bottom, I've made it visible for you guys now. You can take a look at some student samples. So there are all kinds of different topics that you can look through just to see an example of what a finalized essay can look like. These are real life student samples from past courses, and they will give you a really great idea of what your essay should look like. So just in Conestoga, under content, under assignments, under week 13, scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see a list of student samples. You can read as many as you want, and they'll be really helpful in guiding you. So just a refresher, let's talk a little bit about how to write a 5-paragraph essay. This is a really helpful video on YouTube, but we will watch it together right now.
How to write a 5-paragraph essay. What is a 5-paragraph essay? The 5-paragraph essay has 5 paragraphs, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. How do I write the introduction? The introduction should have a hook and a thesis statement. The hook opens your paragraph and is used to grab the attention of your readers so they will want to read more. The hook can be anything from a quote to a funny or startling fact to a short, compelling story about your topic. For example, an essay about an Egyptian pharaoh might begin with a short, interesting anecdote about the pharaoh or ancient Egypt. The hook should transition into your thesis statement, the last sentence of your introduction. The thesis statement summarizes your position on the topic of your paper. You can use the thesis formula to craft your thesis statement. Claim plus reason equals thesis statement. The claim is your stance on the topic of your paper, and the reason is the evidence supporting your claim. For example, if your essay assignment is to write about whether or not people should learn foreign languages, your claim could be yes, and your reason could be because learning foreign languages makes people smarter. Claim people should learn foreign languages plus reason because it makes them smarter equals thesis statement. Hook plus thesis statement equals introduction. How do I write the 3 body paragraphs? The 3 body paragraphs should further develop and support the claim and reasons presented in your thesis statement. Each paragraph should focus on developing a single point. Begin each paragraph with a topic sentence. Think of it as a mini thesis statement. For example, for the topic sentence of your first body paragraph, you could write, "First, learning foreign languages has been proven to slow the aging of the brain." Next, present the evidence that supports your topic sentence, quotes, stories, facts, etc., and each of your body paragraphs with a clincher. The clincher presents your conclusion about the evidence you've presented. Use concluding words to begin the sentence, for example, ultimately, thus, consequently, therefore. Topic sentence plus evidence plus clincher equals body paragraph. How do I write the conclusion? Begin the first sentence of your conclusion with concluding words like in conclusion or lastly or ultimately. Briefly restate your topic and thesis. Paraphrase rather than repeating word for word. You can tie your introduction and conclusion together. For example, if you began your introduction by telling a story, you can finish it in the conclusion. End the paragraph by explaining the significance of your view and why the conclusions you have reached in your paper are important to the reader. Let's review. A 5-paragraph essay has an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. The introduction includes a hook and a thesis statement. Each body paragraph includes a topic sentence, supporting evidence, and a clincher. The conclusion reaffirms your position and further explains why it is important to your readers. Now you know how to write a 5-paragraph essay.
Great, so that was just a little bit of a review on writing essays. Of course, each essay will be a little bit different, but when you're writing your thesis, try to include your 3 or 4 subtopics that support and prove your thesis. So now let's talk about the review process. In order to be successful at the review stage, it's helpful to understand what's going on in our brains when we read our own writing. Wired actually published a fantastic article called Why It's So Hard to Catch Your Own Typos, and it explains why it often feels easier to spot mistakes in other people's writing than in our own. I highly suggest that after this video, you download our PowerPoint and click on that link. It will be really helpful to understand the review process. Reviewing our own writing is a skill that can be learned and practiced rather than a talent that someone is simply good or bad at. You may have heard this review stage described in a number of different ways, such as revision, editing, or proofreading. In fact, each of these terms, revision, editing, and proofreading, has a specific meaning. As we will see, each focuses on a particular aspect of your writing, and combined, they represent a complete review process. So what does revision mean? Revision involves examining how your text is organized as a whole. So ask yourself, do your paragraph link back to your thesis? So does each body paragraph actually prove your thesis? Does your text support its claims with evidence? Is the structure of the paragraph logical, and do they support the purpose and the main claims? Next, when you're editing looks at the quality of individual sentences. So does each sentence make sense? Is it constructed efficiently, concisely, and clearly? Does it use the appropriate tone? And are text references appropriately cited? So even if you're paraphrasing, make sure to add the in-text citation. Next is proofreading. Proofreading checks for errors within sentences. So do they adhere to grammar rules? Are you using correct punctuation and correct spelling? It's very important to not use run-on sentences. So if you've completed an idea, end it with the correct punctuation, usually a period, and then start a new sentence with a new idea. So what are the 3 stages of the review process? The first one is revision, the second is editing, and the third is proofreading. Identify which stage of the review process corresponds with the following definitions. So which one examines how your text is organized as a whole, so a holistic look? That would be revision. Then which one looks at the quality of individual sentences? That is editing. And which one checks for errors within the sentence, so grammar and punctuation, for example, and spelling? That would be proofreading. So now let's move on to the revision checklist. We're going to discuss it in this video, but you can also find it underneath the sorry, there was a technical problem there. Under the description for this assignment, you can also find a document with the revision checklist. So number 1, you need to confirm that you've met the requirements of the assignment. So ask yourself, have you met the length requirements of the assignment, 1,000 to 1,200 words? Does your writing meet the appropriate purpose for this assignment? For example, to inform, to persuade, etc. Have you explored the topic and research question that your instructor approved in response to your proposal, email, or in subsequent conversations? Next, check support for major claims. Have you consulted experts to confirm that claims you've made are factual? Have you provided specific examples to illustrate how your claims might look? And have you avoided making vague or unprovable claims? So some things that may be considered just well-known facts actually still require specific support from your sources. Number 3, check your text against your outline. So ask yourself, have you included all of the supporting information that you originally gathered? If not, has that omission left a gap that you need to address? So it's okay to remove some information as long as it's not leaving any open questions or incomplete information in your essay. Did you address any notes that your instructor made in regards to your outline? So did you read my feedback and actually fix those problems in your outline before moving on to the essay? Number 4, Evaluate the organization and development of your text. So ask yourself, do the paragraphs of your paper fit logically with one another? Is it clear to the reader why each paragraph follows the one that came before? So are you using those connecting words and phrases? And has your focus on answering the original question remained consistent throughout the paper? So make sure every piece of proof that you are supplying actually proves that original thesis. Number 5, check unity and coherence on a paragraph level. Have you used topic and concluding sentences to give your paragraph structure? Do you support your topic sentence logically with details that focus only on the development of one main idea? Have you used transitional words and phrases to build continuity between sentences? And we talked about those transitional words and phrases last week. So if you don't remember clearly, just go back in Conestoga under weekly content and review that because it will be very helpful. So what are the 5 steps that you might take during the revision stage? The first is confirm that you've met the requirements of the assignment. Check support for major claims. Check your text against your outline. Make sure they actually match. Evaluate the organization and development of your text. And check unity and coherence on a paragraph level. So best practices for editing. Let's check for tone. So tone is the term we use to describe the writer's attitude to their subject or their audience. The attitude that you express in your writing should be appropriate for your purpose and audience. To check the appropriateness of your tone, look at the way you have worded or phrased important ideas. Read the following sentence. Can you identify where the wording or phrasing sounds like it doesn't belong in this piece of writing? Attendance at the meeting on Friday is mandatory, as the executive committee will be presenting its goals for the coming fiscal year in addition to other critical things. What doesn't belong? Things. So to match the tone of the sentence, this writer could replace the word things, which is vague and not very formal, with something more precise. For example, matters, issues, topics. Things could mean too much. You want something more precise. So another best practice for editing is reducing the length and number of quotations. So quoting an expert or eyewitness can provide your writing with depth and detail, but your writing can become choppy and confusing if it is filled with too many quotations. So avoid this mistake by quoting selectively. Use quotations only when the wording or phrasing of the passage is particularly profound or powerful. Instead, try to paraphrase the majority of your research. Putting it in your own words demonstrates that you really understood what that quotation is saying, and it helps your reader understand it better as well. Read the following student sample with a quotation integrated into the sentence. A company which has already started to use virtual reality, VR, for their training is NASA. They are using all different types of VR to train their astronauts for the harsh conditions of space. As Gaudiosi, 2016, mentions in his article, by recreating physical locations in VR, you can simulate environments that are not easily accessible or require extensive training. Paragraph 11. Is a quotation the most appropriate and effective way to incorporate this text reference? Try paraphrasing it. You can write it down yourself or you can just follow along on the screen with us. So there's nothing particularly elegant or powerful about the wording of the original quotation. So here's how it might look if the writer paraphrased the passage. A company which has already started to use virtual reality for their training is NASA. They are using all different types of VR to train their astronauts for the harsh conditions of space. This technology is helping the astronauts to gain experience in physical environments that they couldn't otherwise access safely or even at all. Gaudiosi, 2016, paragraph 11. So is it always important to mention the author's name in the sentence? So in the original paragraph, we saw that the student wrote, as Gaudiosi, 2016, mentions in his article, right over here. By recreating physical locations in VR, you can simulate environments that are not easily accessible or require extensive training, paragraph 11. And in this one, we simply paraphrased by saying, this technology is helping the astronauts to gain experience in physical environments that they couldn't otherwise access safely or even at all. And then we just added the standard in-text citation, Gaudiosi, 2016, paragraph 11. So how do we decide when to use the standard citation style and when do we use the split citation? One factor involves the expertise of the source that you're citing. So if the person or organization is a recognizable expert on the topic, either a name that everyone would recognize or a name that one would regard as an expert by looking them up, then using the split citation style is a good way to make your research seem more credible and convincing. So for example, if you were quoting the World Health Organization, the split citation style would be great because most people recognize that the WHO is a credible source. So this is what a standard citation looks like on the left, and then a split citation on the right. So for example, standard citation. Recent reports that claimed processed meats are as dangerous as tobacco and asbestos have been criticized as highly misleading. Picard, 2015, paragraph 9. And then here's a split citation. Globe and Mail health reporter Andre Picard, 2015, challenged recent reports that claimed processed meats are as dangerous as tobacco and asbestos, calling the claim highly misleading. Paragraph 9. So we see the split citation here, right? And highlighting Andre Picard's name in the split style could help this writer establish credibility with his or her reader if the reader is aware of Picard's reputation as a leading voice in the landscape of Canadian healthcare. Even if your reader was not aware of Picard's expertise in this area, the explicit reference to him might actually prompt your reader to search his biography. And if you follow along the PowerPoint at home after you download it, you can click that link and it will actually tell us a little bit about who Andre Picard is. And if they did, they would learn about his extensive experience, his awards and recognition, and links to related other reporting on public health issues. So this actually is someone who is an expert in this field, and a little bit of research would show that. So it actually is a great idea to do a split citation because this is a person who's reliable and who's well known in that field. So here's another example of a standard citation versus a split citation. So on the left here we have our standard citation. Around-the-clock news coverage forces media producers to constantly search for headline-worthy stories. When they report outrageous stories of home gadgets malfunctioning, viewers assume that these incidents occur regularly. But that impression would be false. In fact, of the millions of Americans who own at least one connected device, only a small fraction has come forward as victims of malicious home gadget attacks. Conniff, 2014, page 60. Now let's look at the split citation. Around-the-clock news coverage forces the media producers to constantly search for headline-worthy stories. When they report outrageous stories of home gadgets malfunctioning, viewers assume that these incidents occur regularly, but that impression would be false. According to Time magazine reporter Kelly Conniff, 2014, of the millions of Americans who own at least one connected device, only a small fraction has come forward as victims of malicious home gadget attacks, page 60. Now here is the standard citation. We've got the author's last name, year, and page number at the end in brackets. In this example, little credibility is gained by explicitly identifying Conniff as the source of this information. So although she and her publication, Time magazine, are reliable sources of information, a glance at Conniff's previous bylines reveals no particular area of specialization. So if you were to do a Google search on this author, she really doesn't seem like an expert in this area and doesn't really write about this specifically. Therefore, in this case, the standard citation style would be more appropriate. So best practices for editing check citations. When you submit your writing to the submission folder on Conestoga, the file is automatically reviewed by software that compares your submission to a comprehensive database of web pages and other student writing. This comparison will allow you to see which sections of your paper appear elsewhere on the web in a report referred to as a similarity report. If you have submitted your assignment ahead of the assignment due date, you can review your similarity report to check that you have correctly followed the citation guidelines each time you have used ideas and information originally found in other sources. So let's talk about citing a magazine article. Artificial intelligence, AI, technology is capable of replacing large portions of the workforce is a relatively new innovation, but as Tom Standage notes in The Return of the Machinery Question, originally published in a 2016 edition of The Economist magazine, people in manufacturing and other blue-collar jobs have been worried about losing work to machines for 200 years. Now let's compare it to a standard in-text citation. Artificial intelligence, AI, technology is capable of replacing large portions of the workforce as a relatively new innovation, but people in manufacturing and other blue-collar jobs have been worried about losing work to machines for 200 years. Standage, 2016, paragraph 1. So this is actually very hard to read, and it kind of breaks up what you're trying to say, and it is not necessary. So the best way to quote something like this would be to just add the standard in-text citation at the end. Here's another example. Speech technology can provide visually impaired readers with a valuable tool, but those who teach reading and writing skills to visually impaired students argue that these tools should not replace conventional Braille. In fact, according to researchers Wittenstein and Pardee, 1996, only 1 in 10 teachers of visually impaired students would support replacing Braille entirely with speech technology. So this is citing a secondary source. So a secondary source is when a source is quoting another source. So let's compare it to this. Speech technology can provide visually impaired readers with a valuable tool, but those who teach reading and writing skills to visually impaired students argue that these tools should not replace conventional Braille. In fact, according to researchers Wittenstein and Pardee, as cited in McCarthy et al. 2016, only 1 in 10 teachers of visually impaired students would support replacing Braille entirely with speech technology, page 311. So it's actually very important if you're citing Wittenstein and Pardee, but it's from a study written by McCarthy et al., you have to recognize both. So this one leaves out McCarthy et al., and this one actually includes it. So let's talk about checking citations when citing information from a graphic. So here on the left, we've got, according to 2012 census data gathered by Statistics Canada, consumer electronics accounts for only 22% of products ordered online. Now, let's check a better way to cite this. Although computers and other electronics can be purchased more cheaply online, it's clear most Canadians still prefer to make these kinds of purchases in a store. According to 2012 census data gathered by Statistics Canada, 2014, consumer electronics accounts for only 22% of products ordered online. Product ordered online section. One reason for this trend might be a lack of consumer confidence. Most people simply don't trust themselves to understand the online marketing and to buy the right product. So this just gives us a lot more information, right? According to 2012 census data gathered by Statistics Canada in 2014, and then we refer to the specific section that they're quoting. So now, what would you do if you're citing a corporate website with no author? So here is the incorrect way of doing it. Oculus and other manufacturers of virtual reality, VR, headsets will face challenges in the first few years of marketing their products, but the biggest challenge may be in waiting for consumers to update their existing hardware. Virtual reality technology still relies on a PC for high performance, and the recommended specs for the Rift might price most consumers out of the market. For example, in order to use the Oculus Rift device, you would need an NVIDIA GTX 970 video card, 3 USB 3.0 ports, a CPU equivalent to Intel i5-4590. Now let's see how this compares. Oculus and other manufacturers of virtual reality headsets will face challenges in the first few years of marketing their products, but the biggest challenge may be in waiting for consumers to update their existing hardware. VR technology still relies on a PC for high performance, and the recommended specs for the Rift might price most consumers out of the market. For example, in order to use one of the devices currently on the market, users would need an NVIDIA GTX 970 video card, 3 USB 3.0 ports, a CPU equivalent to Intel i5-4590. Oculus 2016 Recommended PC Specifications section. So the final step for reviewing your text is proofreading. At this point, you are looking for errors of grammar, punctuation, spelling, etc. And just a note before we move on, all the examples that we just talked about, they can be clarified in APA at Conestoga. So when you're dealing with complicated citations, please go on APA at Conestoga. It will be under in-text citations. So anyways, final step is proofreading. You should use a spell and grammar check on your word processor, but beware of its limitations. So if you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, they will automatically highlight spelling mistakes and sometimes grammar mistakes, but they aren't perfect. So unless you have changed your program's default settings, it will likely identify Canadian spelling as incorrect. So most of them are set to American English, which is quite different from Canadian English. It won't be able to alert you if you have misspelled a person's name, because a lot of names they say are incorrect. And it may not catch typos if the mistaken word is still technically a word. So you might type the wrong thing, but if it's a real word, it won't recognize it and it won't correct it for you. So before you submit, when you're in your proofreading stage, I would recommend clicking on these links. So again, make sure you've downloaded this PowerPoint, because all these links will lead you to some really great resources. So you can read a little bit about the history of particular words and the complexity of English development. But what's even more helpful is these resources here on commonly confused English words and spelling in our online book, Writing for Success. So I would highly recommend at least reading the last two. So here are some general tips. Leave at least a bit of time between finishing the first draft and beginning your review. So write your first draft, go for a walk, maybe have some dinner, hang out with your roommates, watch some Netflix, and then begin your review process. Work from a printed page if you can, to avoid the limitations of spelling and grammar checks. But if you can't print, change the appearance of the screen. So you might want to change the font, the background color, just to make it easier for you to read. I find that it is really helpful to read your draft out loud. I don't catch a lot of my mistakes until I read things out loud. And then read your draft from the bottom to the top, one paragraph at a time. This will slow down your reading and help you to see what's actually on the page, interfering with your brain's impulse to ignore small errors. So that's a really cool trick. If you go and read that article that was at the beginning of the slide, way at the beginning, because you wrote your own paper, you have a very big picture idea of what the meaning is. And because you're so focused on the big picture, it's very easy to miss the little mistakes. So a great way to do that is to read the last paragraph first and then the second last and work from there, because that disrupts that kind of big idea and helps you focus specifically on each paragraph. So that's a really great tip. So I hope that this helps you understand a little bit more about how to write your final draft. Make sure that you look at your outline, you read all of my feedback, then you write your first draft. Take a break and then do your proofreading, do your revision, and then write your final draft. And make sure to upload it to Conestoga's submission box a few hours before it's actually due, so that you get to read that Turnitin report. If the similarity is very high, it will tell you where you haven't cited properly, and then you can fill that in your own document and then re-upload it. As always, if you have any questions or if you need extra time for your assignments, please don't be afraid to reach out to me. Send me an email. Don't contact me in Conestoga because I can't respond right away. Always email me from your Student Outlook email. And if you have any questions, please just let me know.